In my previous Universal horror movie review video about Frankenstein, I mentioned that as a result of that film, James Whale became sort of the star director of the Universal horror franchise. And to me, James Whale never made a more enjoyable, fun, funny, just all-out romp of a film than the movie I'm about to talk about, The Invisible Man. I said that Whale's Bride of Frankenstein is probably the jewel of the Universal horror franchise, which makes it a little odd that I'm not going to talk about it as I review these Universal horror films this week, but I'm going to come back to it at some other time because I feel like it definitely deserves to be touted and analyzed and critiqued, but I'm going in a slightly different direction with these Universal horror films leading up to Halloween this year. But I couldn't possibly talk about Universal horror movies without The Invisible Man. I mean, Bride of Frankenstein may be a better film, but god damn it, The Invisible Man is my personal favorite of all the Universal horror films. I cannot tell you of the love that I have for this movie. It is so much fun. And if you have somehow not seen The Invisible Man, directed by James Whale, starring Claude Rains, by all means, stop this video right now and go watch it. Rent the DVD, find it on Netflix, find it somewhere. Watch The Invisible Man if you have not seen it, because you are missing out, man. It is absolutely one of the most wonderful films you will ever see. I trust you will agree with me. I can't tell you how much fun it is. It's adapted from the H.G. Wells novel, of course. It's the first major film role of Claude Rains, who is invisible for the entire film. You only see him either swathed in bandages and robes or just as a voice, just as a disembodied presence in the scene. Claude Rains would go on from this to have quite a stellar career as an actor, where you could see him. He starred in my favorite Alfred Hitchcock film, Notorious, in the 1940s. He starred and was nominated for an Academy Award for his supporting role as a corrupt senator in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. But his start was The Invisible Man, and in many ways it's still his defining role as mad scientist Jack Griffin, who becomes invisible. And oh, what a great movie. I mentioned in the previous review that James Whale had a great sense of humor, and in fact that his sense of humor was one of his defining traits as a director, and went on to become one of the great defining traits of the Universal horror franchise. And nowhere is that sense of humor put to better use or in more full display than in The Invisible Man, because this is such a funny movie. It is the funniest of the Universal horror films. It's the cleverest, the most witty and inventive, and at the same time, it's the most cold-blooded. That's what makes James Whale's horror films so wonderful, is that he has this incredible sense of humor and sense of comic timing. And yet, that humor is layered over such darkness. I mean, the horror elements of The Invisible Man are so dark and so bleak and shown so unflinchingly. The best example of that is in the character of Dr. Kemp. Kemp was Jack Griffin's accomplice partner as a scientist, and when Griffin returns, having become in The Invisible Man, he enlists Kemp in his plot, both to help him become visible again and also to carry out this sort of deranged lunatic scheme that he's concocted in his mind. He's been driven insane by the invisibility process, and he now wants to rule the world. He wants to sell his invisibility secret to the governments of the world and to commit mass crimes as an invisible man to demonstrate the worth of his secret. And he enlists Kemp in all this, and Kemp inevitably betrays him for his own good. Kemp is acting in a way he feels is irresponsible by bringing in the police and contacting Griffin's fiancée and her father, who is the scientist who employed Griffin and Kemp. But he betrays Griffin, and Griffin tells Kemp on their last night together before he has to flee to escape the police, He's invisible, but you can almost imagine him wagging his finger in Kemp's face. He says, "You've betrayed me, Kemp, and tomorrow night at 10 o'clock I shall kill you. I promise, no matter how far you run, no matter where you may try to hide. I shall kill you tomorrow night at 10 o'clock. And then he vanishes. He leaves. And the next night at 10 o'clock, despite all of the precautions taken by the police, despite Kemp sneaking out of his house and going to the police station, and then disguising himself as a cop and sneaking back to his house and getting in his car and driving off into the country to escape Griffin, to go beyond his reach, Griffin is there. The Invisible Man is there in the car riding next to Kemp, and he reveals himself in that wonderful Claude Rains voice. He announces that he's there, and he proceeds to murder Kemp exactly as he said he would. He ties his hands and feet, he puts him into his car, he pushes the car off the road, down a cliff, through the fence. It rides down the hill, does like a flip, lands at the bottom of the hill. And there's no fireball or anything like that. At least I don't remember there being a fireball. But it does like a big flip and bang, and he's just dead. Like, that's it. The dude says he's going to kill Kemp, and he kills him. And it is the most cold-blooded shit. And there just aren't words. There just aren't words to describe how great this movie is. If you have not seen The Invisible Man, you absolutely have to see it. Wonderful sense of humor, wonderful dark, morbid sense of humor. And yet such energy, such a great energetic performance at the center of it by Claude Rains, who has such incredible presence despite being a disembodied voice for the entire film. There's the famous shot at the very end where Griffin dies and he returns to his visible form, and you see just the glimpse of Claude Rains laying there in the bed with his eyes closed as the now dead Invisible Man turned visible. And that's the only time you actually see Claude Rains in the entire film. Everything else is either just his voice or Rains wrapped in bandages so you can see him as he moves about. And he has such incredible presence in the film, despite the fact that you never see him. You never see his face. You never see his eyes. He never gets to act with the most expressive part of his body, his face. And yet he is there in every scene that he's in with such incredible presence and such incredible authority. And it's such a great performance. It's such a great, wonderful, it's big and theatrical and campy and overstated and melodramatic, but the Universal Horror series is one of those places where that sort of performance is completely at home. It's the perfect context for that sort of great, big theatrical performance. And god damn it, does Claude Rains give one of those. It's just a huge performance. And the dialogue is written it allows him to just really chew on it and play to those strengths and just swing for the fences in every scene. There are so many memorable lines as delivered by Claude Rains. These are lines that my wife and I quote to each other back and forth all the time, like at random points. This is one of our great common references and our sort of in-jokes in our relationship, is the Invisible Man. Like the scene where Griffin is describing how he became invisible and how he suddenly realized that he had all this power and all this ambition. He's describing it to his very worried fiance who has come to be by his side. And he's just going off on this megalomaniacal rant. And the lines that he has to say are just so wonderful. Like there's one where he says, the drugs I took seemed to light up my brain. I mean, what a great line. The drugs I took seemed to light up my brain. Or when he starts going off on one of his crazy tangents about how he has such incredible power now that he's invisible, and he has the power to the power to walk into the gold vaults of the nations, into the Holy of Holies. And then he looks out the window and notices the moon, and he folds his arms like this in this wonderful theatrical gesture and looks up at the moon, and he goes, "Even the moon's frightened of me. Frightened to death. The whole world's frightened to death." Just, if you haven't seen the movie, I beg you to go watch the movie. I beg you to watch the movie so you can see how great it is and you can share this feeling with me. And besides that great performance by Claude Rains, it has those other hallmarks of a James Whale film, the gigantic sets that the camera sort of glides through with the huge high ceilings. It's the same sort of strange, nebulous setting where it's a village and it seems sort of 19th century and Central European. But at the same time, people are driving in cars, people have advanced science, they have flashlights, they have radios, things like this. So it's definitely in that universal horror film setting where you're not quite sure where it is, you're not quite sure what time it is. Some people have English accents, some people don't. So it's just sort of everywhere and every time. That wonderful sort of generic setting that the universal horror films are set in. That is definitely the world in which The Invisible Man takes place. Technically superb. The Invisible Man has some really groundbreaking special effects that still hold up fairly well today. A lot of the invisible effects, like when objects would move when they were supposedly being manipulated by the Invisible Man, that was mostly done with wire work. And the wire work in The Invisible Man is so good, it's almost undetectable. It's actually a lot better than the wire work that was done in some of the later Invisible Man films, as there were many sequels to The Invisible Man, as there were to the other successful Universal monster movies. But the wire work in this original Invisible Man, perhaps due to the technical expertise and the careful discriminating eye of James Whale, is better than in any of the films that followed it. It's really, really well done, and it really has a sense of weight and purpose, and it really feels like the Invisible Man is moving these objects, picking up these books, moving these glasses about, as opposed to objects just moving by themselves or being manipulated by movie special effects. The effect is really, really strong that it is the Invisible Man moving these things. And a lot of that is due to the technical precision and, of course, also to the presence of Claude Rains' voice in the scene, placing him there in that place, even though we know intellectually that he isn't actually there. And then the other notable special effects are, of course, the invisible scenes where you see him standing fully dressed but with missing hands and feet or with a missing head. That was accomplished with a technique analogous to the blue screen or green screen keying techniques that we would use today, but because it was black and white, it was more of a black screen effect. Things were shot, scenes were shot twice, once on the set as it would appear in the final shot, and then again with the camera in the same angle, but with everything draped in black, and the actor, Claude Rains in this case, portraying the Invisible Man, dressed all in black except for the clothes that we would want to see in the scene. And then the two shots, when the film was developed, all the black would translate as clear on the film, would be developed as clear, and then the two shots would be composited together. And some of those effect shots in The Invisible Man are actually 3 or 4 different elements composited together to give the invisibility at various angles when he's looking in mirrors and things like that. Very complex compositing work, and done very, very well, almost seamlessly. And when you consider that this film was made in 1933, look at how great those special effects still look today. The take-home message is that The Invisible Man is one of the best of the Universal horror films. It is not usually spoken of as often as Dracula or Frankenstein or even the Wolfman, which I'm getting to. But it is definitely my favorite and one of the very best of the series, and one of the great American horror films and horror comedies ever made. And if you haven't seen it, I'm telling you, go see The Invisible Man. See it online. It's streaming. It's been released on DVD several times. Check out The Invisible Man the first chance you get, because I think you'll really like it. It is one of my very, very favorite films.